Thank you for tuning in to Kriya Yoga Online. The following recording is an introduction to the mysticism of Kriya Yoga. It was recorded at our first biennial Kriya Yoga retreat in Ireland. In this talk, I will discuss the meaning of intensive spiritual practice that leads to the highest spiritual realization. All right. How was lunch? Good. Great. We're going to continue on using David's wonderful illustrations here that he's provided for us today. We're going to build upon what David was talking about and tie it a little bit more to the Yoga Sutras. And it brings us to the idea of, again, why do we practice Kriya Yoga? We practice Kriya Yoga to experience Samadhi, to experience oneness. And what does that mean? The idea of Samadhi, of oneness, that goal that we want to achieve when we're engaged in a spiritual path, what does it boil down to? What do you really want? Anyone want to volunteer their motivations and intentions to the group? Raise your hand if you do.
I just want to become far more disciplined and reveal what's really there.
Why? What do you think is going to happen once you do that?
I think I'll be. I don't have any sort of grand ideas. It's more like.
How do you want to feel?
Yeah, so that just very open and very aware, and
if you could boil that down to one word, what would it be?
But I can only say benefit.
Okay.
To all, to me, benefit.
Well, hold on to that.
Yeah.
How about you, Danelle?
Peace.
Peace? Is that what you want to feel? Peace? How about you, Chris?
Clarity.
Okay. And if you had clarity, how would you feel? Okay.
Clear.
Clear? Okay.
Happy.
Happy, there it is. Don't you think that if you had what you wanted, you would be happy? Right? Well, this is, generally speaking, what I think all of us are aiming for in some way. You know, I say I want to have knowledge of the universe. What does that mean for me? It means I'm going to be happy because I'm going to have what I want. I want to have peace. What does that mean for me? I'm going to be happy because I've got that experience that I want. And the whole process that we're going through, each one of us, maybe through different routes, different spiritual traditions, or different meditation practices, the whole motivating factor is to find that state of peace, that state of feeling, well, peace or happiness. Now, how many of you have been on a vacation before? Okay. How many of you have been on a vacation where you were actually on vacation, meaning you were able to enjoy yourself? Okay. How many of you have been in a situation on vacation, whether it's at the beach or visiting a forest or something like that, where you were present, you were there, you were awake, you were able to observe and experience everything that's going on, and you didn't feel like you had to do anything else, be any different. You were just able to be in that experience. Any of you have that? Okay. Is that what you're shooting for? If you really dig down? One time, when I lived in Asheville, I'd been meditating a long time, and I decided to take a nap. And naps are not new to me, but for some reason during this nap, I decided what I was going to do was I was just going to let my body fall asleep, and anything that I was thinking about, considering, worrying about, feeling, I was just absolutely going to let it go. It didn't matter, I don't care. And I don't mean like a bitter I don't care. I mean just, you know what, it doesn't matter, just let it, just drop it. And I did that as I was falling asleep. And when I woke up, I felt just like I was floating, like I was light, like I was free. And I walked out, and my first wife, Melissa, she looked at me and she said, "What's up with you?" And I said, "I just feel pretty good." And she said, "What did you do?" And I explained what I did. And it was in that just simple experience that I recognized that by doing that, you are able to start to access that state of clarity and freedom. I've had other people describe this to me, whether it's with a nap or going on a vacation. They said it's as though all the stuff I'm trying to experience and achieve through spiritual growth, I was able to achieve just by dropping all the stuff that was unnecessary. And so in a way, what we're aiming to do is to drop all this stuff that is unnecessary. And that brings us to this target here, this bullseye that we're aiming for. I drew two other words on this diagram, and Donnell brought it up yesterday, and I think it's a very important thing to consider, because in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it describes the purpose of creation, the purpose of life, the purpose of all of this in two words. They say that the purpose of all of this is Bhoga. Bhoga, the yellow, you might not be able to see it, but it's in English, Bhoga. And then Apavarga. Apavarga. It says that the reason that you are in creation, that you have this body, you have this form, you have this experience, is for two reasons. Bhoga, which means worldly enjoyment or experience. The other option is Apavarga, which is emancipation, freedom, letting go of all of this. And there are two currents that are going on in life and creation. One is an outward flowing current from the source outward. That's Bhoga. That's worldly experience. The other current, which we have, and this is all related to Samkhya philosophy. This is a bit of an overgeneralization, but if you study Samkhya philosophy later on, this will make a bit more sense to you. The other current is flowing inward, back towards source, Apavarga. And it's Apavarga that leads to Kaivalya. These are a lot of Sanskrit words. I'll repeat them so you'll get an idea of what they are. Kaivalya is liberation, freedom. All right, so there's this current coming out from source, and there's a current moving back into source. That is what is going on right now in our experience on a very, very subtle level. That's why you're here. It's also why you're practicing meditation, to go back to source, to realize what source is. Now, this little spot here that we didn't put a name to, but now I can, because I've got the markers. But this little spot here, okay, this is a model. This is not reality. This is just a way for us to conceptualize and consider what's going on. So remember, it's a model. Don't turn this into a religion. This is pure consciousness, pure stillness. God, the divine, you use the word you want to use, but it is wholeness. It is completion. It is actually beyond conceptualization. So I'm just throwing out these words to give you a general idea, but it is beyond conceptualization. You might be familiar with some religious traditions that talk about first comes the word, right? And from the word comes creation and so on. Well, in the yoga tradition, instead of the word in that sense, we have the idea of Om, which is a vibration. Now, what I'm talking about right now is incomprehensible to your human mind, which means no matter how good I try to describe it, it's never going to be the real thing. So I can't really tell you what that's like, but I can tell you the processes through yoga and Kriya Yoga or a spiritual tradition, how to have the experience itself. And Donnell, would you mind coming up here for a minute? You're a teacher, so you don't mind, right? Just stand here. And what was the fruit you were telling us about yesterday?
Oh, feijoa.
Does anyone know what that fruit is? Raise your hand if you know what it is. You know what it is?
Janelle told me.
Well, that's because she told me. Okay, but no one else knows what that fruit is, right? Describe that fruit to them.
Yeah, near impossible to describe, but it's a fruit that's usually about that big. It's green. It's got a white, sort of pulpy, seedless inside. It's
Like a banana?
Squishy. It's can be used in place of a banana if you're making banana cakes or crumbles. You could use that. It's a little bit tangy, got a bit of a fizz to it.
Okay. Anything
Ripe
else
ones
you'd
are
say
very
about it?
sweet.
Okay. Ask her questions so you really know what that is. Anyone wonder about that fruit? What can you ask her so you know what that fruit is?
Sort of whitey creamy.
Can you make juice from it?
Yes.
Is it fibrous like a plum?
Soft texture. Yeah, a bit more squishy.
Is it just like a banana? It's a ripe banana. I mean, texture-wise.
Is it like the insides of a passion fruit?
Doesn't have the hard seeds, no.
But it's like that
not-
kind of weird sliminess?
It's a little bit.
If you take the skin off, will it remain whole or will it just...
It will remain whole. You generally eat them by cutting them in half like a kiwi fruit and sort of scooping them out, or you just bite them off.
Yeah.
Where are the seeds?
They're tiny. You don't even know that they're there, but like a strawberry, they're sort of, yeah.
On the outside?
No.
Does it grow on a tree?
Yes.
Okay, that's enough. You can sit. All right. So do you know what that is now?
Yep.
Who knows what that is? All right. You don't know what that is, do you? How would you know what that is? By eating it. How are you going to eat one?
Go to New Zealand.
What do you got to do to get to New Zealand from here?
Pick a bus.
You have to take a bus and get on an airplane. But what do you have to do? What do you have to have in order to get on a plane?
Money.
You need money. What do you need to do to have money? Work. What do you have to do to be able to work?
Have some skills.
Have some skills, right? Where do you get some skills?
Education.
Education. How do you get an education?
Go to school or college.
Okay. Who's going to encourage you to do that?
Parents.
Where do they come from?
Same place as me.
Anyway, the reason I use that is because you see, in order for you to try that fruit, you have to have all that in place for it to happen, right? And that's not even all of it. That's just a small, minuscule experience that you have to have. So, and you still don't know what it is until you experience it. And that's why when it comes to this idea of recognizing what source is or divine consciousness or Godhead, however you want to interpret it, I can tell you about it all day long, but it's not going to be what it actually is. But again, this is the beautiful thing about anyone's spiritual practice, but since we're doing Kriya Yoga is it provides a model, a framework, a way to put the puzzle together so that step by step, you can finally figure out how to get some money, to get on a plane, to figure out where Danelle lives, to go to her house, and to have one of these fruits, right? But you have to go through all that process to make it happen. Now, we're going to get a little esoteric here. But it's important for you to understand why Bhoga and Apavarga is so important. So the purpose of creation is Bhoga and Apavarga. That's the purpose of creation. So if that's the purpose of creation, is there anything wrong with the experience we're having right now? No. It's just being engaged in Bhoga, having an experience. Is there anything wrong with deciding, you know what? I'm not really interested in this stuff anymore. I really want to go within and experience something subtler than this physical world. Is there anything wrong with deciding that the spiritual path or the spiritual life is important for you? Okay. So all the people that are out there that don't care about spirituality at all, is there anything wrong with them?
No.
Should they be doing what you're doing? No. But who should you be hanging out with? The people who are doing the same thing you are, because that'll make you better at it. Okay. Now, we have source, infinite consciousness, pure wholeness. Now, that can exist by itself because it is always there. It is eternal. I like to use the word spirit for it. That's not accurate, but it gives you an idea. I like to use the word spirit. And you have spirit, perfectly fulfilled, perfectly satisfied, one with all. When you hear that term, like when Jesus had said, "I and the Father are one," it's the recognition that form was integrally aware of where it came from, the Father, right, or the source. So once we have the source and it wants to experience creation, it has to do something. And it's described as a vibration, and a current is set up. And that's where you get the idea of the Om, or the cosmic sound. And once that comes out, the next phase is the intellectual phase. The capacity to know and experience. The capacity to start to form a sense of identity and a sense of concepts. It's just the precursor. It's not even really something that you can quantify, but it's the possibility of it. Let's see if there's a chart here that David did that I can use. Let's see. Yeah, so he talks about the intellectual mind and the buddhi. So he mentioned how if you use your buddhi, then you're a Buddha, right? You're a knower. Mr. Davis used to tell a story where he would say that the Buddha was approached by a student and was asked, "Are you a spiritual teacher?" And he said no. He said, "Are you enlightened?" And the Buddha said no. And he went on with all of these questions, and finally the student became exasperated. And the student said, "Well, what are you?" And the Buddha said, "I'm awake." That's what he said, "I'm awake." But awake to what? At this level, when there is the capacity for knowledgeable intellect, there is existence, but there is existence which knows that it is part of the whole, right? There's existence which knows that it is part of the whole. If you were functioning from this level here, you would be in a body, you'd be going to the bathroom, you'd be eating food, you'd be writing letters to people, you'd be doing everything that you do, but there would be no confusion about the fact that you were part of the wholeness of life, that you were part of divinity. You would just know it. It would be as obvious as the fact that you have brown hair if you have brown hair. You wouldn't question it, you wouldn't think about it, it would just be the way it is. So once we have this initial expression, then we move into this stage. Now, after this stage, we move into the mental stage. And in the mental stage, that's when there is a formation of concepts and ideas, possibilities for things to come up to say, that's a cup. This person has blonde hair. That's a shark. Those kinds of things. But they're just the possibility of concepts. This is the mental level. Now, it continues to go until emotions come into play, when there is a visceral feeling of things, when you can sense and experience changes within the energy and the structure within you. And from that's where the senses come from. The ability to see, the ability to taste, the ability to touch, the ability to feel. All of your emotions, all the stuff that you sense within is all being sort of charged and experienced in this emotional level. Some people said that this is also the astral level. It can be related to the level of dreams. And it continues until eventually all of this kind of crystallizes or becomes more solid in its conceptualization as the physical. That's where now there is a rock. Not the potential of a rock, not the possibility of a rock, but something that you can pick up, use your organs of action, move around, do stuff with. That's the physical. That's the end of it. That's where our physical bodies are right now. And so we have this flow of pure consciousness into the intellectual, into the mental, into the emotional, into the physical. That is the process of Bhoga, because you have to have all of these things in order to have experience. Just like in order to be able to taste that fruit, you have to go through all those things to taste the fruit. In order for you to have this experience here right now, you have to have each one of these things to be able to perceive, process, and interact the way we are right now. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, this is the interesting part. This exists all the time. It never does not exist. It is always existing. What was the phrase? I do not think, therefore I do not am. Yeah. So this always am. Got it? This always am. Now, the intellectual comes from this. The mental comes from this. The emotional comes from this. The physical comes from this. If you get rid of the physical, this, and this still exists. If you get rid of the emotional, this still exists. If you get rid of the mental and even the intellectual, this still exists. So, the process of yoga, the process of spiritual practice, many people sometimes say that the world isn't real, right? They say, this isn't real, so why bother with it? When they say it's not real, they don't mean it's not experience. They don't mean that it is innately false. What they mean is it is temporary. It is temporary. Now, when you live as though the physical experience is all there is, you're trapped. Because what happens in the physical world? Is there anything in the physical world which persists eternally? So even if you could exist for 13.4 billion years, a lot would change in that time, wouldn't it? So when you are identified solely with the physical, what are you bound to experience?
Change.
Death, yeah, change. Well, that is death, right, that's good. So you experience death, but what is death? It's change. And what is the thing that causes us to not feel clear and whole and peaceful?
Resistance.
What is it? Attachment, resistance, fear of change, all these things. But all of that, that's just what happens in the physical realm. So you see, many people come to yoga or a spiritual path thinking that they're going to transform into a physical version of themselves, which is like superhuman, immortal, and will never change. That's not ever going to happen. Ever. As long as you have a physical form and you are relating to a physical world, change is always going to happen one way or the other. So from the perspective of yoga, that's why the statement that I made yesterday, which was, the yogi is meant to endure pleasure and pain, hot and cold, these types of things. Because if you have the knowledge that that is the case, you're going to save yourself a lot of struggle. So one of the first principles that we have to work out on this whole path is to recognize change is going to happen. And if we assume that something's always going to stay the same, we are insane. We are. Absolutely insane. And that's how most people live their life, in this state of insanity. And that's not a judgment, and maybe insanity was too harsh of a word, but if you step back and really look at it from a deeper perspective, it looks absolutely nuts. Now, the energetic, the emotional. How many of you had a dream last night? Okay, everyone had a dream last night. Anyone in your dream, when you were dreaming, were you aware of who you think you were? Were you aware of yourself as this body with the kind of hairstyle you have and that? You were? Anyone else? Were you? Harry?
Yeah.
You were? Okay. Have you had a dream where you were just sort of observing things changing? Like you weren't you. You wouldn't look in a mirror and see your nose and your facial features, but like you were seeing things, but you weren't necessarily conscious of your physical form. Has any of you had that?
Yeah.
How was it that you did that? How could you experience something while not relating it to this physical form? Well, the way you were able to do that was because you were experiencing in the energetic level, the astral level, the emotional level. And again, this is an oversimplification. So those of you who are online who want to criticize me, don't. We'll do it anyway. I had an interesting memo on one of my YouTube comments this morning that said, "What are you doing with a tattoo? Your videos were much better when you were younger. You've lost your spiritual charisma. So that's why I say things like that to the video. But anyway, so you could see that in the realm of dream, the physical doesn't have to be there. Why is it that when people have near-death experiences or death experiences, they lose their body, but they're still there? Not them as what we're talking about, but their consciousness is still there. That's because the physical has fallen away and the person has moved into this kind of level, this kind of realm. Now, how many of you have had a moment, and usually this happens in meditation, where you weren't aware of your physical body, you weren't aware of concepts, images, distractions, there was just a sense of being able to experience, like pure experience. Anyone have that? Okay, so some of you have had that, which means to a degree you have let go of the physical, let go of the emotional, and you have moved into this realm here. Because there's still a sense of like I-ness with it. There's still a sense of not personality, but just like you existed, right? So in that sense, you have recognized that when the physical is not there, when the emotional is not there, there's still a way to be fully present. And so what we're doing with our meditation practice is we're learning in our study of spiritual philosophy in a tradition. What we're learning is to recognize these truths, that these things exist, but they're not permanent. And we're learning to make ourselves more and more comfortable, first with the physical, then with becoming more comfortable with our energetic, our emotional nature, and then being more comfortable with just the capacity to be, the mental, you could, using this chart, use that word, or the causal. And eventually, you would be able to move into the intellectual level in accord with this chart, where there is presence, but no sense of an individual. There is awareness, there is the capacity to know that you exist, but this is why it becomes incomprehensible, because you can't, unless you've experienced it, you don't really know necessarily what I'm talking about, but you can move into it. And that's the intellectual, where you start to have really deep and profound spiritual experiences, where you start to recognize, oh, I am this. I am this. Again, I'm using language, and language is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. But in that process, you are engaging what's called Apavarga. And as you go through this experience of Apavarga, you become free. Then you become able to live in the same way that when you were on vacation, you didn't have a thing to worry about. But you were able to go out to dinner. You were able to talk with your family. You were able to, go jump in the sea. Things were happening, but you were free in a way. So through the practice of yoga, we're learning to experience that first of all in our meditation, because our meditation is a very important training ground to do that. Because if you set up your meditation space, your meditation time, and your meditation practice well, ideally during that block of time, you should have as minimal distractions as possible, which should make it easier for you to absolutely let go of all of this stuff. And I like to encourage people to keep that in mind, that when they go into the meditation, start out from the very outset, consciously telling yourself, like looking at the things that are going on in your life, and look at each one of them and say, I can't do anything about that now, put it down. I can't do anything about that now, put it down. Go through all of them until eventually you know you can't do anything about them, no matter how much you think about them. Nothing's going to change. So that should give you the space and the freedom to actually get into your meditation process, so it becomes spiritually transforming, rather than you just trying to manage all your problems and repress everything. Because a lot of us, as David said, we can treat meditation as an escape, rather than a time to go within and experience this depth of spiritual quality. All we're doing is just breathing really hard or reciting a mantra like you've got OCD, or like you're trying to block out something. You're not actually going into the experience. So you have to set aside your meditation time and decide that during that time, nothing else matters. And oddly, as time goes on and you start to recognize how easy that is and how useful that is, then you start to be curious about, well, can I do this maybe for 5 or 10 minutes after I'm done meditating? And then you extend it a little bit further until in time, your whole day is permeated by that sense of freedom. Again, you're still able to function physically, emotionally, mentally. You can still do all that. But now you have a choice. You know, when it comes to being self-realized or enlightened or experiencing a advanced spiritual state, it has nothing to do with having special abilities, magical powers, walking around spouting out devotional cliches all the time. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your ability to be within the world when it's time to be within the world, but when it's time to withdraw within and let go of all of that, you can. And this is one of the reasons why when someone is spiritually advanced and they're told they're going to die, of course, in the moment it might be a jarring experience because they're used to being alive. But if they have some discernment, some insight, that leaving of the body is no different than anything they've ever done in meditation before, because every time they go into meditation, they're releasing their attachment to these things. Now again, if you have a strong identification with one of these other layers, that's going to be hard to do. And this is why the spiritual path is challenging. Because in order to release your attachment to many of these layers, you have little snags, you have little triggers, you have little bits of conditioning from yourself, from how you were raised, from your culture, from ancestral issues that continuously keep you in this outward flowing current. There's an outward flowing current, there's an inward flowing current. When you're meditating, you're directing your awareness inward. Now, if you're a brand new meditator, the current moving outward is like Niagara Falls. And you're in a little boat, and you're trying to get back in there. But it's Niagara Falls. And so you're trying and you're trying, you keep being pushed back out into your needs, your desires, your wants, all these things. But every single time that you take a moment to meditate and you go in a little bit further, it's like your momentum and the capacity gets stronger. So this current starts to be strengthened. It's still really weak though. Imagine there are two currents. One is Niagara Falls, the other is like the little stream out here. Well, the more you meditate, you're feeding the momentum of this smaller stream until, as the years go by, one day that smaller stream will be just as powerful as the outward flowing stream. And that's where David was talking about where it can be really frustrating, because you know how to you know what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to be moving into the state of stillness, but you're kind of at odds with yourself because a part of you still wants to get that promotion, still wants to have that specific relationship, still wants to do this or that. But there's another part of you that really feels like merging in the infinite, merging in God, engaging your spiritual path is actually really important. Like you can really feel how important it is. But you still have the other current kind of pushing against it. And so that's when you're kind of, how do I describe it? You're on the right path, you're doing very well, but you still feel like you've got a lot to work through in a way. And you do, because they're equal at this point in time. But what you have to do is kind of persist, continue with that effort until in time that the inward flowing current is now bigger, just a little bit, than the outward flowing current. And you keep going until eventually this becomes so strong that no matter what you want, no matter what desire you have, it doesn't faze you. You have a choice. You can decide whether you want to engage in it, or you can simply stay in this inner experience. And I forget, who was I listening to? By the way, I listen to and I read very few teachers. I could probably name about 3 of them that I pay attention to, because there are only about 3 of them that I have read and listened to that never, ever, ever did I say to myself, what are they talking about? Never did I have any doubt. So there's only about 3 of them that I listened to. But one of them, he had said that you know when you're really kind of overcoming this outward flowing experience, when something is presented to you that is very attractive to maybe your younger self or to someone else, and you can see the value in it, you think that would be an interesting experience, but you can just as easily say, no, I'm good. You just let it go. That's when you know that you really have this current moving inward, because you become more interested in the subtler levels of experience, the more spiritual levels of experience, and you're less interested in getting caught up in all this stuff, which inevitably is always going to lead to fluctuations, pleasure and pain. You understand? In the Yoga Sutras, one of my favorite quotes, let's see if I can remember it. Essentially it says, "To the discerning yogi, all is but pain." Yeah. Isn't that great? Seems kind of dark, but if you know the philosophy behind it, if you know the idea behind it, that would be like saying, to the discerning mystic, any worldly experience is pain. That's really what it's saying, And when you know someone who is really spiritually driven, there's a real sense of fulfillment in that. Like last week, we went to Wicklow. What was the name of that monastery?
Glendalough.
Yeah, Glendalough. And we were going through the ruins of it. And as I was walking through it, I just started crying. No one saw me because I put my sunglasses on. But I started crying, and I thought to myself, why am I crying? And when I tuned back into it, what I was recognizing was this site contained people who gave their life to God. Like, that's what they did. They let go of everything else. I mean, I'm sure they drank some beer and whatnot, but they let go of everything else, and they chose that every moment, every experience was going to be towards prayer or study or something like that. I was overcome by that, and that seemed so right. And I don't know why it made me cry. It wasn't tears of sadness. It was more tears of joy to know that there are people in the world who chose to do that, right? In Sri Yukteswar's commentary on the Holy Science, he uses the Bible a few times and quotes from there. And I don't remember the exact quote, but there was a quote that he said something like, God had indicated, I have nothing against you other than you gave up your first love, right? And the first love is this, spirit. So when we think of God not liking us or punishing us, it's not that. It's that we chose to get all caught up in this crap up here. Not that it's crap, it's enjoyable, it's part of the experience, but we chose, for many of us, the choice, we made the choice to experience constant change rather than to remain centered in our first love, which is what we actually are, the infinite, you see? So this is why Kriya Yoga and meditation, or again, any spiritual path, is very important, because it's helping us to realize this. And it is absolutely possible for all of us to realize this. You might not necessarily be able to grasp it immediately. You might not necessarily be able to understand the whys of why you have to do the things you have to do. But that is why there's also a tradition, a lineage of teachers, of people who have gone through the process so that they can help see where you are in this whole thing. And if you were brand new to meditation, you think I'm going to show you this map and start talking about the intellectual level and Apavarga and Bhoga? No, if you're brand new to meditation, I'm going to say the first thing you need to do is learn to sit down and be quiet. That's where it starts, because that's starting to get mastery over this physical level. Once you have mastery over this physical level, which means that you can sit down, you can be quiet, I might also encourage you to start doing some hatha yoga or some exercise to make this physical body, this physical temple fit. Because our ability to process consciousness and spirit is dependent on the capacity of our nervous system and our bodies. So once you get that underway, I'm probably then going to say, well, let's take a look at all of your emotional stuff. Like that underlying fear, that underlying worry, that underlying depression. And that's when you're talking to me and you're saying, yeah, but I keep meditating, I keep using these techniques, and I still have this issue, and that's when I say, have you talked to a counselor? Because we know you've got the physical stuff. Now you got to clear up this level right here. Once this level becomes less muddied, less clear, then you have the ability to say, oh, well, what's this level? And then you've got the mental. And what is the mental? The mental, in a way, is like getting your concepts right. We were talking about the yamas and niyamas yesterday as though they're pieces of a puzzle. I'm going to talk about that again and repeat myself. The way I look at the yamas and niyamas, again, can you list them off for me, David?
Yeah.
Go for it.
In English,
Yes, in English.
harmlessness, truthfulness, non-stealing, non-attachment, and rightful use of your resources. That's the yamas. The niyamas would be purity, contentment, self-discipline, self-study, and surrender to
Surrender to that. At least it's consistent, right? So when I look at those ideas, yes, they're things that we can act upon. But to me, they're more than just things that you act upon. They're not things that you force yourself to do to be a good person. To me, they are qualities of consciousness. Like if you imagine consciousness like it's a program, right? And if your program's all messed up, it's not going to give you anything sensical. It's just going to be a jumble of images and these types of things. But if you're able to get the variables and the code and all this in the right spot, you might be able to make the program create a beautiful picture. Well, if consciousness, spirit is like this big program, then embodying these qualities that David just listed, that's like putting the code together in a coherent way, right? And that's where we get to, in a way, this mental level, because once that becomes coherent, which means that when it comes to practicing truthfulness, it's not something you have to think about anymore. You just know how to do it. When it comes to practicing harmlessness, you don't have to think about it. It feels almost in poor taste to do something that is causing harm. We have a lot of bugs and insects and snakes and things where we live. And I'm sure you might do this too. I don't just kill them. If I can, I pick them up and take them outside. I actually feel bad when I kill a little bug, right? Because to me, it is life as well. Now, we had a termite issue, and it was going to destroy my house. Did I want to kill all the termites? No. But because I wanted to save my house, I did. So you see, in that situation, harmlessness was in action as best as I could embody it. And I didn't go through a mental rigmarole trying to convince myself of the whys and the why nots of these ideas. It was just something that I knew to do. In the same way, when I was younger, I was very sarcastic, I was very witty, and it was very easy for me to throw out criticism and snide remarks and hurtful things. Very easy for me to do that. Had I not had a good friend who was a black belt and 4 years older than me in high school, I probably would have been a little more deformed in this area. But he saved me many times, and so I'm still his friend. But as time went on, and as I became more and more able to consider this, to practice meditation, to consider the yamas and niyamas, I don't really want to say nasty things to people. I still have the habit, it might pop into my mind, but there's a part of me that just says, no, that's in bad taste. Like there's a part of me that knows the people that I might, think negative things about, even if I absolutely disagree with them philosophically, there's a part of me that knows that they are the way they are because of situations that I cannot comprehend, and me being a jerk to them is absolutely not going to help anything. And that's like when harmlessness becomes innate to you, right? Same thing about truth-telling, non-stealing, and all this. So when those things become second nature to you, you've done a good job at harmonizing this level here, using the model that I'm trying to use to describe this. And when that becomes clear, it becomes very easy for you to move into the intellectual phase, because this is like a place of surrender. And when we think of surrender, we often think of like giving up. But when it comes to surrender in this phase, when you're that close to spirit, it's not surrender like, do with me what you will, even though I'm probably going to hate every minute of it. It's just a knowing that everything is in your highest good. And even if you have to experience some kind of temporary pain or discomfort, you don't care. You know that it is, in a sense, part of the whole plan. And then eventually you keep meditating, you keep diving into the experience, and then you pop into this. And when you pop into this, you recognize it's always been there. It's like you open your eyes and you recognize, oh, I've been here this whole time. I've just been distracted by this out here. So that's why non-attachment, minimizing your distractions, have to be part of the process, because all of this is a distraction from this. And in your daily life, anything you can do to minimize your distractions gives you one more bit of fuel to not be distracted from this anymore. Okay. So our whole goal, our whole purpose is kaivalya. Kaivalya means liberation. And that comes by having knowledge of the process of creation, Bhoga, and also the process of emancipation. And when you can go both ways and not ever lose sight of this, you're free. Now you might ask, why did we forget in the first place? In the last few retreats, I've told people I'm no longer answering philosophical questions. But what I will say is, you will know that answer if you follow the process. It's just like the whole fruit thing. I can make up all kinds of stories and all kinds of philosophies and dogmas and religions about the whys, but the whys don't matter. By following the process, you will get the knowledge. Now, there's one quote I want to share with you. And this is from, this is the final sutra in Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science. Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science, it's a book, very small book, with 4 small chapters, very similar to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It has Sanskrit, and then it has a commentary under it. And Swami Sri Yukteswar, the teacher in the middle there, had a very strong interest in bridging the gap between Eastern and Western spirituality. So he studied the Bible, he gave talks on the Bible, he was also into Sanskrit, obviously, and the Vedas and the Upanishads. And his goal with this book was to show the essential similarities, the essential same purpose between the tradition of Christianity and also the traditions of the East. But the sutras themselves in Sanskrit, when you read through them, they really focus a lot on what we've discussed here. And at the very end, he summarizes it all. He says, then, I'm going to read it and then I'll describe what it means. Then, from the knowledge of creation, and the knowledge of sustaining of life, and the knowledge of the dissolution of life, and the cessation of all, the ending of all is these distractions. One goes beyond Maya, which is the feeling that you are a small little individual separated from everything. And when you see that, then there's liberation, then there's freedom. And this goes back to the story I was telling you yesterday about the ghost in the closet. If everyone told you there's a ghost in the closet, you believe there's a ghost in the closet, you're going to live in a way as though there's a ghost in there and avoid that part of the house and be anxious when you go near it. But when you finally go and open the closet and see that it's not there, you become liberated from that fear. You become liberated from that false experience. So it's by going through the process of yoga, Kriya Yoga, it's by contemplating what I've just discussed, even if you don't get it right now, just starting to try, that you will eventually get an insight about this that will make sense to you. You will get an insight about this that will make sense to you. You will get an insight about all these levels until eventually 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, you'll go, wait a minute, and you'll remember all of this, and you'll say, that's right. And you won't be able to describe it any better than I just did. But you will have a feeling of it as though someone gave you, what was the fruit again?
Fijawa.
A fijawa. It's as though someone gave you a fijawa finally, and you took a bite out of it. That's what it is. You don't have to worry about it anymore. You're done, right? So Sri Yukteswar's description, you see, we think of him, Sri Yukteswar, as though he was a jnana yogi, which means a yogi of knowledge, a yogi who's trying to figure things out or is figuring things out. And we often imagine, we take the idea of knowledge in the same way that we imagine like a professor in a college or someone who's a researcher. They're writing all kinds of things down, they're researching, they're thinking. That's not what a jnana yogi is doing. A jnana yogi is gaining experience of all of this. A jnana yogi is like the adventurer who has a map and says, all right, I'm not going to sit here and study this map for the next 20 years. It says, I'm at point A, I need to figure out how to get to point B. And then the jnana yogi is going to start exploring this stuff. And you have to be interested in it. If you're not interested in exploring it, you're not going to get the knowledge. So that's why when people say to be devoted, it means you are devoted to the practice. So we think of Sri Yukteswar as though he was a jnana yogi, but he was a devotee. He was devoted to the whole experience. In the same way that Ramana Maharshi, they said that he's a jnana yogi, because he has knowledge. But he had knowledge because he loved this. He loved this. He loved the source, right? And he was able to figure out and experience what that is and stay there. Like if you love your partner, you want to get home to your partner and stay there. He figured out how to do that. We're all figuring out how to do that. So when you think of things as though they're jnana yoga or a jnana yogi, it doesn't mean that they're thinking about things all the time. They're not over-intellectualizing everything. They're going through the process of figuring this out. That's what it means to have jnana yoga. And the same goes for the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Many people study the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and they try to memorize it and they try to, be very clear on what Apavarga means, what Bhoga means, what Viveka means. They get very fixated on defining words when they don't recognize that the principles within the Yoga Sutras, it's a manual of how to do it. And in order to get the experience, you have to actually do it, right? So this is another reason why I don't answer philosophical questions anymore. Because most of the time, when someone wants me to answer a philosophical question, what they want me to do is just keep talking at them to pacify the time, right? Versus if I said, let's just sit down and shut up. Yeah, but, nope, be quiet. Yeah, but, I said be quiet. And you keep on going until eventually they give up and they do shut up. Oh, there it is, right? So, I don't know if you saw, but when I was in New York, maybe I already told you, I don't know. When I was in New York in July, it was me, Ishadas, and Swami Nirvanananda, and someone at the end of the Q&A, we were talking about prayer, and they said, if you could simplify the most effective prayer, what would it be? And so Ishadas was going to answer, but then they said, no, we want to hear from all of you. There were three of us. So they asked Craig Ishadas first, and he said, thank you. Like that would be the most important prayer. And then they asked Swami, and Swami is a very gregarious, devotional, loving person. So he said, I love you. And then they asked me, and I said, be quiet. But it gets you to the same place. It gets you to the same place. They made a shirt of it. Yeah. There's a little heart on it that says, thank you, I love you, be quiet. Yeah. Now, let me see what time it is. We can take a break. I'll go a little bit longer, then we'll take a short break, because I know lunch can tire you out a little bit. All right. So what I want to talk about in this second section is viveka, which is knowledge or discernment, and then speak about vichara and the experience of bliss. Vichara is often translated as inquiry, like the who am I or what am I, but vichara really is an exploration of the subtle, of learning how to move from the physical down to the subtle. Where did everybody go?
Eating skulls.
Eating scones. Talking about cosmic manifestation. They're eating scones.
Eating
He is the
You've
troublemaker.
got to eat them.
Or just look at the level.
What's that?
Yeah, doing Bhoga.
So, we'll call this joy.
Yeah, okay.
Once I interviewed a Kriya Yoga teacher from India, and he was of different lineage, and he was very Indian. English was definitely not his first language. And, when you talk to people, you meet them for the first time, you just do a little chit chat. And I wasn't ready for this. I said to him, "How are you doing?" He said, "I feel joy." And that was it. He just stopped. And okay. Yeah. So when people ask you how you're doing, you're going to say, "I feel joy." And if you don't, just fake it. Until you make it, that's right. Because eventually you'll get there.
Can you feel joy?
Can you feel the joy? Yeah.
Can you feel it?
Not the concept. The actual feeling. Do you mean it when you say it? Okay. What are you that is saying it? Anyway, so let's get back to this. Now, this experience that we're talking about in the Yoga Sutras, they describe the path to this, or potentially describes the path to this, as viveka kyati, which means unceasing discrimination. Unceasing discrimination. And David talked about this a little bit this morning. That means that once you know, once you have this idea, once you have this model, this concept, you continuously, unceasingly work towards recognizing the physical is not eternal. The emotional is not eternal. None of this is eternal. And you do it unceasingly. You don't take a holiday. You don't take 2 weeks for Christmas. You don't stop just because your mother-in-law's in town. You are unceasingly doing this. Which means when you are absolutely depressed out of your mind, what are you doing? You're practicing unceasing discrimination. When you are having the time of your life on the roller coaster of your dreams, what are you doing? You're practicing unceasing discrimination. It doesn't say you don't get on the roller coaster. It doesn't say you repress all the grief. It says whatever is going on, you're practicing viveka kyati, which means unceasing discrimination. And another person translated this as unwavering knowledge in which there is zero doubt. Unwavering knowledge when there is zero doubt. And we might have trouble with that. All right there, Chris? Okay. You don't like this talk?
My first cup.
So it's unwavering knowledge without doubt. Now, many people have a problem with that because they like doubting things. They want to study this philosophy, but they're not so sure. They want to study that, but they're not so sure. They want to study with a teacher that knows what's going on, but they're not so sure that they really want to trust that person. And that's very valid. I mean, there are people out there that you don't want to trust. But the way I look at things is you should find out if there's a tradition, a philosophy, a teacher, something that you can commit yourself to implicitly. And of course, it might mean as time goes on, you figure out that was not the teacher you're supposed to be committed to, or that's not the tradition that's right for you. But you have to give yourself fully to it to get the full experience to see if it actually is for you. Right? I mean, I approach relationships in that way. When I'm in a relationship with someone, I don't sit around and think to myself, well, is there someone better? I don't sit around and dream about the girl walking down the street. I decide I'm with someone, and so that's what I'm focusing on. When I'm in a group playing music with someone, that's who I'm playing with. When I've got a friend, that person is my friend. And I am committed to them and loyal to them until they prove otherwise. And I might learn that, things change. But what I have found in doing that is that it allowed me to have very solid, trustworthy, helpful relationships that allowed me to progress in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and so on. So this idea of not having doubt, it's not giving up your discernment. It's not making you into the puppet of some manipulative person. You have discernment, but it is about figuring out a way to go into what you're doing fully. Like if I'm learning a musical instrument, I'm going to find a teacher. I'm going to say, you're going to teach me how to play this thing, and I'm going to commit for 2 years. I'm not going to look at other teachers. I'm not going to say, but they do it this way. I'm going to do it the way they tell me to do it, and I'm going to see what happens. That's how I approach things. And the knowledge without doubt is like moving into a space where you know your hair is brown if you have brown hair, right? What color is your hair?
Brown.
Do you doubt that? Have you ever doubted that? Isn't that weird? But it's that kind of doubt, or it's that kind of non-doubt, I suppose. And the whole purpose of this is not to keep yourself in a mental, emotional loop of maybe, maybe not, maybe, maybe not. It's about going into the experience until you know beyond any doubt what is actually true of you. And that is what you would call viveka khyati. And you'll get there in your own way. Again, you might follow a tradition for a while and find out that it got you to a point, but you need to shift gears a little bit. You might find a teacher that worked for you when you were in college, but as you grew and changed, you recognize, I need to shift gears a little bit. You know, I was fortunate in that I met Mr. Davis when I was 20, and he was 69 when I met him. So he had 50 or so years on me in regards to studying this stuff. And probably because of that, while occasionally I would have curiosity about why he did what he did, as time went on, I recognized he knows what he's talking about. And the relationship that I developed with him was implicit, just like the relationship I have with Jasmine as a partner, or David as a friend. It was implicit. I think that's the right word. Does it seem like that's the right word? Implicit?
What do you mean?
I don't know. What does implicit mean? Maybe I need to look that up. I'll look it up. It was a good relationship. That's what I mean to say. It was a solid relationship. You know, sometimes when you're writing a word that you've written 100 times, you look at it and you wonder, is that how that's spelled? That's what's happened with the word implicit. And because of that, I was allowed in my life to stay focused on what gave me the potential to move into this space. It took a long time. It's been 23 years. I was telling someone at lunch this week. So the 14th, was the 14th Monday? Yeah, the 14th being Monday, and then the 17th being Thursday. It was 23 years ago exactly, same week, that I first met Mr. Davis. And it was on the 17th, on a Thursday, when I first went through the initiation process. And I look back on that, and that was a very grounding experience. And Mr. Davis didn't coddle me. He didn't try to make me feel better about things. He gave me the information, and he encouraged me to follow the path. When I would not necessarily understand what he was saying, he would still just continue to point me in the right direction. And it was up to me to continue to listen. It was up to me to continue to look at it. If I had left, hearing some things, personal things from people that knew him, I think he would have been not necessarily happy about that, but he would have just let me go because he didn't have any expectations of me. So it was up to me to follow that route. And this is the importance of a lineage or teachers. You know, even in other traditions, whether it's the Buddha or other traditions, we have a teacher or a figurehead or an inspirational person that helps us direct our devotion and our energy towards that. And that's what leads us to realization. So the purpose of the lineage of teachers is not to worship these people. It's not to deify their personality. It's not to make them into anything other than what they are. But what they are is a physical form, mental, emotional form, a human that came through a human body that decided that what was most important was not all the distractions, but was this. And when you are around someone who is interested in something, you tend to flow in that same direction. If you're around people who are interested in drinking all the time, you're going to tend to drink a lot more. If you're surrounded by people who are interested in music, even if you don't play anything, you're going to listen to a lot more music. If you're surrounded by people who have a strong emphasis towards spiritual realization, spiritual growth, you are naturally going to kind of, maybe through osmosis, move in that direction anyway. And so the whole purpose of the lineage and the teachers is to serve as a boost to this inward flowing current. Because when you get near them, their current is like Niagara Falls going in this way. So when you move into their current, even if yours is still really strongly going outward, you automatically have more of a boost towards this realization. And hopefully, you develop it yourself until you yourself become so strong that you're able to stay there, whether you're around them, thinking about them or not. You understand? So this is why spiritual company is so important, because people who are sincerely involved in their spiritual growth, meaning they're not doing it because they want to get in a group and have some buddies. They're not doing it because they have some emotional issues with their family and they're trying to fulfill some infantile needs. They're doing it because they are sincerely interested in knowing what this is. And I don't care if they're total hoodlums or thugs. If they're interested in this, no matter their lifestyle, they're still going to have that effect on you, right? So that's really what I wanted to speak to today. One more thing, and we'll take some questions. Vichara. Vichara is often described as inquiry. Who am I? What am I? That's what Ramana Maharshi would talk about. And you can approach it that way if you already have the capacity to sit still, be calm, and flow your awareness within. You'll get it just like that. But if you don't, you have to engage in any kind of process which is going to allow your awareness to become more subtle and more subtle. You'll notice when I lead meditations that when I focus on the chakras, I tell you to feel the physical. Feel the physical. Get some knowledge of what is there. And then I encourage you to be a little more subtle about it. Feel like the energy, the pressure, if you can sense an energetic field or something like that in the area. That's bringing you more into the subtle, until eventually you will be able to simply hold your awareness in these spaces, have your own experience, and you're moving closer and closer to an experience of pure consciousness. Those practices are ways of rehearsing the experience of becoming comfortable in the subtler and subtler stages of life. You will eventually move from the physical, where you think, you have to go have surgery or take a pill or something like that. That's like a very physical form of medicine. And for a lot of us, we need that because we are focused on a physical form. But for some people, and I've known some of these people, where they have gone to an energetic healer or have done acupuncture or something more subtle, and they've gotten better. Because for some odd reason, their physical, their being was more attuned to like a subtler level. And I've known one or two people, not many, one or two people who, one person I know had developed, not emphysema, when you get asbestos in your lungs. You know what I'm talking about?
COPD.
No, not COPD. It'll come to me. But it was kind of a tumor or growth in his lungs. And the doctor basically said, you've got 6 months to live. That's it. Not emphysema, no. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, and so he decided to do some chemotherapy. He did chemotherapy and made him sick. He was also an herbalist. So he said, enough with chemotherapy. I'm going to do herbalism, and I'm going to work with an energetic healer, a spiritual healer. And that's what he did. He committed to it. And Roy was his teacher. And when he told Roy about this diagnosis, Roy said to him, don't let the words of doctors poison your mind about what's possible. And when he heard that, something clicked. And that's when he started doing the herbalism and the juicing. And he went back to the doctor 6 months later, and there was just a little teeny something, and the doctors wanted to look at it, and it was just scar tissue. So on that level, because he had an attunement to a more sensitive part of experience, a more rarefied part of experience, he was able to kind of tap into a quality of consciousness. So in a way, change occurred from that subtler level. Now, I'm not telling you that story to make you believe that if you get sick, that's going to work for you. It might, but in my own life, when my wife Melissa got sick, Roy didn't say that to her or me. Roy said, I wish I could perform miracles, but all you need to do is remain centered in the self no matter what happens. So you see, I want to give you both sides of this. But there are aspects of life that you can move into more and more subtle states. And when you know that you are infinite spirit and something happens to your body, it doesn't freak you out as much. So what? Your body's going to die anyway, right? That's sort of how you look at it. When you know that you are infinite spirit and something comes up in your life which causes you grief or anger or rage, yeah, you might respond to it because it's the appropriate thing to do, but you do not define your life by that anymore because you know that you're not the emotional level. You know that you're infinite spirit. So when you have the knowledge, you're able to more appropriately relate to this whole realm of possibility through Bhoga.
If you would like to learn more about upcoming in-person retreats or online events, please visit KriyaYogaOnline.com. If you would like to support this Kriya Yoga teaching ministry, consider becoming a Kriya Yoga Online Patreon member. Patreon members receive monthly lessons, invitations to monthly Q&A sessions, and early announcements for all retreats and classes. It is the support of our Patreon community, our Kriya Yoga apprenticeship and discipleship students, that make these recordings and the Kriya Yoga podcast freely available and with minimal advertisements. It is our goal at Kriya Yoga Online to share a spiritual path that nourishes and encourages your highest clarity and well-being. Thank you for being with us, and please share this recording with any friends, family, or colleagues you feel would benefit from this message.